So let us pray. Amen. So I have a lot of pending classes, but I feel compelled to finish the thoughts I was trying to share. The Sabbath when Aronsin was to present the online class, I didn't have sufficient time to finish those thoughts. So, and because I think almost, if not all of us were in that class, I just feel compelled to finish that class. I know I also have another pending class about the subject of the daily. So I'm just going to give a short recap to bring us to speed to what I was trying to share. And maybe for those who are not there can actually catch up with us. So I began by trying to compare two books, the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. And I said there are many thoughts, there are many parallels that you draw to show that these two books are actually the same book. You can actually borrow thoughts from Ellen White. She's going to say that the book of Daniel is a sealed book. The book of Revelation is a what? Is a revelation. These two books complement one another. Other thoughts, the book of Daniel is the 27th book of the Bible in the Old Testament. The Old Testament has 66 books, and Daniel is actually the 27th book. And when you go to Revelation, it is also the 27th book, which is the last book in the New Testament. So another interesting thought that I also wanted us to see is that when you go to the book of Daniel, Daniel will actually teach us about 4 kingdoms of Bible prophecy. So we can go to Daniel 2 and we can actually see the image, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. The same thoughts are repeated in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8, and well expounded in Daniel chapter 11. And when you go to Revelation, you are actually going to see that it depicts the same subject, kingdoms of Bible prophecy, and it is going to give us how many kingdoms? 7. So Revelation enlarges the subject of the kingdoms of Bible prophecy, and it gives us 7 kingdoms. So we are going to have an added 3. So, and what I wanted us to see from that class is that when you go to the book of Daniel 2, 7, and 8, they give us the 4 kingdoms. And when you go to Daniel chapter 11, this is what I see actually. Daniel 2 puts more emphasis on the head, Babylon. So Daniel is able to explain to Nebuchadnezzar that you are this head of gold, you be a rule over the whole world, and you are this head of gold. The second kingdom, the only statement Daniel mentioned is that after you shall arise what? Another kingdom that shall be inferior to thee. That's the only statement given. And it also speaks about the third kingdom, which shall be a rule over the whole earth. So when you bring in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel 7 repeats all the 4 kingdoms and more details is given. The lion with 2 wings, the wings are plucked, the bear with 3 ribs raised on one side, the leopard with 4 heads, and the terrible and dreadful kingdom, which is the 4th kingdom. In Daniel 7, you're going to see more information or more symbology is given to help us identify which kingdoms are these. And when you go to Daniel 8 now, Daniel will be able to tell us, by the way, the second kingdom is the kings of Medes and Persia. The third kingdom is the kingdom of what? Of Grecia. So there is still no more clarity to Daniel about the 4th kingdom. But when you go to Daniel 11, there is more clarity given. I think chapter 11 from verse 1 to 4. Daniel speaks about the kings of Persia and speaks about the mighty king Alexandria. And I would say that, let me say 70% of Daniel 11 will give us a deepened understanding of the third kingdom, the kingdom of Grecia, how it will be divided, and we will end up having the king of the north and the king of the south. And it will also expound to us about the fourth kingdom, Rome, and it will also teach us about the two faces of Rome, that is pagan and papal, a concept you can again actually be able to retrieve right from Daniel 2. I remember when Elder Jeff used to say that when you go to the story of Daniel 2, actually there are 2 feet showing the two faces. I don't know how you'd prove that. I can't remember clearly. You go to Daniel 7 and speaks of a king of a fierce countenance. It's now clear in Daniel 8 when you see the literal horn, and you actually see that one is feminine, the other one is masculine. And Daniel 11 continues to expound on that thought. So I'm going to suggest when you come to the story of Revelation, and I tried to draw this structure. So when you come to Revelation, and I try to draw this structure, is that there are 7 kingdoms. That's the beast of Revelation 17. It has 7 heads. And when you look at these 7 kingdoms, the Bible seems to as if to show us there is actually an 8, but we can prove that there are no 8 kingdoms. There are actually 7 kingdoms, because this, which seems like to be an 8, is not actually a new kingdom. It is a return. This is the beast that was in the history of the 6. It is not, and in the history of the 7. So in the history of the 7th, it shall. In the history of the 7th, it shall. In the history of the 7th, it shall ascend. So, and there was a good connection made between the 7th and this 8th. The same way you'd make a good connection with the 5th. So this is actually one kingdom. I'm not trying to prove all that. So, and I was able to show by looking at the history of the kingdoms, this is the history of the kingdoms. You can still draw the same parallels with the history of the churches, because there are actually 7 churches. So we know that this 7th church, this is the Laodicean church. And this Laodicean church, we would call it the SDA church. And what you're going to see, this is not a pleasant church to God. God says, I will spew you out of my what? My mouth. you'd actually see we look like we are an eighth church, but we are not actually a different church, because the Bible is clear. There are only how many churches? 7. So we know that we have a connection to this church, and you ought to have a model to see, learning from past histories, that if you come to this history, this is the first church, and this is the church Ephesus. And what you will actually realize is that for you to have the first church Ephesus, Paul is going to give us parables. The first one is in the book of Galatians chapter 3, where Paul speaks of 2 wives. Abraham has 2 wives, Sarah and Agar. And according to the story, Abraham has to cast out the bondwoman, the one who is in captivity with her children. And Paul is making that parable to show that this is the casting out of the Jewish church, because God is going into a relationship with a new church. So you can actually show that as we have church number 1, we are also going to have church number what? Number 7. This is the Jewish church. So 7 and 1 are going to run parallel. So you can actually show that as much as we have 7, the 7th church here, we also need to understand we have church number 1, which is, I'm going to call this movement. So you can also make connections and show that as much as we are church number 1, seems as if we are the 8th, but we are not. So you can just look at the external history and look at the internal history, and you're going to see the same pattern. Looking at the kingdoms and looking at the church, they end up giving the same pattern. So after doing that, so the book of Revelation is going to, this is the portion that Daniel gives us. But the book of Revelation is going to give us, Daniel will only give us 4 kingdoms. The book of Revelation will give us, I'm going to put, it will speak of the 4, but it will more emphasize on these last 3 kingdoms. It will speak us, it will not tell us about Babylon in clarity, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome. It will speak of the beast of Revelation 13, and it will speak, that is 13 verse 1. It will speak of the beast of Revelation 13 from verse 11, and it will give us some gems, little gems about this kingdom. But if you want to understand more about this kingdom, it gives you a pattern that this is a resurrection of this beast here. And so you can be able to see how the 7th kingdom actually looks like. So after doing that, I'm just trying to give the thoughts that I did in that class. I'm going to suggest that when you come to the book of Revelation, and it is going to focus on this, it is going to focus more on this part here, and this is the history that actually impacts us more at the end of the world. So there are many studies that have been done to actually help us understand about those kingdoms. So, and I went to the story of Daniel chapter 11, and I said, I think around 2016. So there is a development of a message. So this is 2014. So let me begin it from 1989. I'm going to 2001. So let me first work with that. So it is here when we have Daniel 11 verse 40. This is the conflict between the king of the north and the king of the south. And for so long, based on the understanding at that time, the people believed, the elder Jeff used to believe, that 1989 was the fulfillment of Daniel 11:40. let me rephrase that, was the complete fulfillment of Daniel 11:40. And what Elder Jeff anticipated as the next waymark is Daniel 11 verse 41. So we were in the mindset that we already fulfilled verse 40, so we are waiting verse 41. And I think that thought was challenged, that if you have that line of thinking, it means then you are in a vacuum. You have stepped from this stepping stone, gone into a ditch, and awaiting another waymark. So what was understood is that Daniel 11 verse 40 can be understood as a point, and also can be understood as a what? A period. So we are still in the history of the time of the end. In the history of Daniel 11 verse 40. Maybe I would extend this line and show. Up to this waymark, all this is in the history of the time of the end. So you cannot just say we have already completed the experience of the time of the end. And there were proofs that were later developed to justify that claim. And one of the concepts that was brought in to show that actually we are not yet in the complete fulfillment of Daniel 11:40 is the concept of death and resurrection. Because around here, 2016, I don't know the correct pronunciation, but they were a couple. Someone can give me the correct pronunciation. They were called, is it Chiawotu or Chiawot? Chiawotu, something like that. They are going to the book of Daniel, chapter 11, and from verse 5 to 16. And what they will do is to show us that actually this verse 11:40 has not been perfectly fulfilled. Because as the king of the south was wounded and died, this study was able to demonstrate that the king of the south is going to do what? To resurrect. Are we together? And this is where they are going to give us two interesting waymarks. The first waymark we would call a waymark we called Raphia, and a waymark we called Panium. So, and they are not going to develop these two waymarks here, because I want us to see the development of a message in this dispensation. Because in 2014, we have a very interesting study, the study of Ezra 7:9. And by comparing the Millerite history with our history, we came to a realization that this is how our reform line looks like. Before, it was just like that. But now, we are going to realize that before the Sunday law fulfills, there are two waymarks. A waymark we would call midnight, and a waymark we would call what? But the problem is, we didn't know how these two waymarks looked like. We only got a pattern from the Millerite history that this is 1798, this is April 19, 1844, and before October 22nd, Snow has to give a message in July 21. Ellen White says midway between when they first expected Christ to come and when they afterward thought Christ would come. And then we had August the 15th, when the message swells and everyone is crying, behold, the bridegroom cometh. So what was done is that by overlaying these two waymarks, so they came to a realization that the story in Daniel 11:5 to 16 is going to repeat the same line here, and it is going to tell us the nature of these two waymarks. That this waymark can be synonymously called Raphia, and this waymark can be synonymously called Panium. So they are going to understand that these two waymarks now, if you want to understand their fulfillment, that they are actual what? Battles between the king of the north and the king of the south. So I'm not going to expound more on this, because of time, but I'm just trying to refresh our thoughts. So Ezra contributes to this understanding. So for so long now, we still have a problem, because as we anticipate and wait these two battles, Raphia and Panium, to be fulfilled, what is in the minds of the people? That they are actually hot wars. Are we together? We expect the king of the north and the king of the south to fight one another, to engage in a hot war. The same way we also saw in the stories in Daniel 11, I think this is verse 12, this is verse 13 and 14. Number two, as we are anticipated a hot war, so we also, sorry, we also lacked a lot of information of even how this hot war would look like. So the only thing we wanted to see is America commissioning their army to either directly invade Russia, or Russia directly commissioning their army to invade America. Are we together? And we didn't see any development of that line of thinking. So we now come to the year 2018. And in 2018, what we have is the midnight cry message. And what the midnight cry message will do, it will start correcting our problem. It will tell us, the studies made will tell us, if you want to understand this way mark, Raphia, and this way mark, Panium, how they look like, you need to understand the mode of warfare. So we were told it's no longer a hot war, and the first thought we were given is the issue of information war. We are in the information age. I always have, I remember the first person I saw teaching the issue of information war was Onono, teaching us about information age when we were still in aviation. And trying to demonstrate to us all the ages, the Stone Age, the Iron Age, and the Information Age. Then, after understanding about the information war, another concept was taught us: spheres of influence. We were going back to Raphia and Panium, and we had to look at Ptolemy and Seleucus. And what we realized, what are they fighting for? To take each other's kingdom? No. What are they fighting for? A small territory called what? Called Syria. Are we together? So this is a territory that was owned by Antigonus. They killed him in the Battle of Ipsus. Ptolemy took it for himself. Seleucus let Ptolemy keep it because they were allies. But their descendants, the descendants of Seleucus, Antiochus Magnus was the first, Antiochus Theos, they are not willing to allow this territory to go into the hands of Ptolemy. They want to reclaim it. And this is what broke the Syrian wars we find in the book of Daniel. So actually, going deeper into the wars, they are not fighting to take each other's territories. They are fighting for a sphere of influence. Another important thing, more so in the Battle of Panium, Ptolemy Epiphanes, the young general, too young to go to war, he's going to hire mercenaries to fight for him. One of them is Scupas, his name, an Aetolian general who could not even withstand the king of the north. So they're also going to engage in proxy wars, and most of the proxies, this is where we found hot wars. So the midnight cry message shifts our understanding of how the battle between the king of the north and the king of the south looked like. It actually took us to this beginning of everything, and it took us to a Cold War. And this Cold War, if you look at it, it is the same dynamic of the war we see here. Why is it called a Cold War? Because they are going to avoid what? They are going to avoid a hot engagement. What is the issue here? They have what we call MAD, mutually assured destruction. After 1945, we have two nuclear powers, and they have seen how nuclear powers can do in Hiroshima and the other, is it Nagasaki? No one wants to begin a nuclear war. They know if they go to a hot war, there is assured destruction. They are going to engage in a Cold War. How does it look like? spying on one another, right? Proxies like the Mujahideen, and they are fighting for spheres. America on the west wants to snatch the satellite states. USSR on the east wants to protect the satellite states. So the Cold War has the DNA of the mode of warfare that we had. Everything was clear at the time of the end. It was a bias that we had adopted because we were not yet informed that we were in the information age. We still thought like the World War I and World War II wars is the same thing we expect to see in our dispensation. So I think that's a refreshment that we are now going to understand two wars. But I also want to add another concept that when you come to the midnight cry, these are some of the thoughts it's going to add to our understanding. It is also going to give more information. It is going to give us dates. Based on other models like the revolutions, we are going to understand about November 9. And we are also going to understand about the year 2021. So, and it is also going to change our worldview. Because in this history, as we anticipated this waymark to be fulfilled, the Sunday law, how did this history look like in our minds? We saw globalism as the problem. Are we together? We anticipated an American model that is actually a globalist. And we saw that as the problem. But the Minacry tells us actually globalism is the right thing that we should fight for, that we should anticipate. Because what America wants to do, we were taken to this history here and we looked at the two versions of the New World Order. 1988, Mikhail Gorbachev at the G8 summit trying to give the New World Order. He has already foreseen the downfall of the USSR. He sees if the world needs to exist in peace, this is the nations of the world. And what he proposes is multilateralism, or what we will call globalism. This is Gorbachev's new world order. This is Mikhail Gorbachev. The same term, new world order, is not the first time it has been mentioned. You can take it to the history of the world wars. But George Bush, later, after the collapse of the USSR in 1991, I think it's 94 if I'm not wrong, someone can correct me. Around here, George Bush gives a new world order. He redefines how new world order looks like. That these are the nations of the world, but who is the one controlling these nations? USA. So this is unipolarism or unilateralism. Whatever you want to call it, nationalism. So this is George Bush, New World Order. And Elder Tess was able to demonstrate to us, number one, you have a wrong perspective of the seventh kingdom. Because what was our understanding of the seventh kingdom? That this is how it looks like. Are we together? And what we were able to understand, that the seventh kingdom will actually adopt Bush model of the New World Order. I really hope you can see what Trump is actually doing. So it also shifted our understanding of how the history of the seventh kingdom looks like, of how we expect to see things here in the history of the seventh kingdom. So these are some of the concepts that the Minacry message was able to shape in our understanding. So, and I just want to re-echo some points. How did the Minacry message shift our understanding on these concepts? So I want to draw a line here. So this is 1989. So I'm going to draw 2016, 2018, 2019, 2021, let me just put the Sunday law, but I'm going to put 2024, if you'll agree with me. And I'm going to put the close of probation here. So that's my line. And there is one consistent thing in that line. Because all this is going to touch on the wars between the king of the north and the king of the south. So when you come to 2016, so let me expand this line here because I also want to make a point. I will make a small point here. I'm going to put it actually in a different color to make a distinction. So we are seeing that this is Daniel 11:40. It's the king of the north and the king of the south. And I'm saying, in this history, after understanding 1989, we came to understand 2019 as the Battle of Raphia, and we came to understand 2021 as the Battle of Paniam. This was a war between the king of the north and the king of the south. King of the north, king of the south. This ought to have been a victory for the king of the south, a loss for the king of the north. This ought to have been a victory for the king of the north, a loss for the king of the south. So right after 2016, this is the only pattern we have about the wars between the king of the north and the king of the south. But later, the midnight cry message is going to add to us more battles. The Battle of Raphia will be redefined, and what name will the Battle of Raphia be given? What name do we recall the Battle of Raphia in 2019? Asculum. What name do we give the Battle of Paniam? And also, this way Mark Sandelo, we also understood it to be renamed, and what name was it given? The Battle of what? Argos, that actually brings down the downfall of Pyrrhus. So the Minacry message is going to add, it's going to rephrase the terms and give us new names. But it is not going to stop there, because it is going to add to us two more battles. So we are here in history by then. We are not yet 2019. And how will Elder Tess explain to us the mode of warfare? She's going to tell us that 2018 is actually a battle between the king of the north and the king of the what? What name is given to this battle? The Battle of Heraclea. And what name is given to this battle here? So we are going to realize that we are here in history. We are waiting for Raphia and Paniam to be fulfilled. And because of our blindness, we don't understand how the war is ongoing. There are already two battles past, and we couldn't even trace them. And we had to look backwards and ask ourselves, in this battle of Ipsas, in this battle of Heraclea, how was the war won? What was the mode of warfare? What were they fighting for? And based on these two testimonies, we were able to prove these points. Because when you come to the battle of Ipsas, for the first time in history, in our dispensation, you are going to see an alliance in 2014. And this is the alliance between the king of the north and the king of the what? So we had models that would prove this. The world wars, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Stalin and Hitler. Because as they go into an alliance, they are beginning World War II. 2016 is the beginning of World War II. So many models would show that in the history of Pyrrhus, this is Pyrrhus into an alliance with Demetrius, Demetrius marrying Pyrrhus' sister. So this alliance here is what will result in 2016. So 2014 to 2016, what you have is an alliance. But this alliance, if you remember, we called it lies on what? Lies on one table. Hitler did not want to co-work with Stalin. What did Hitler want? Only supplies. You supply me, I go and defeat the West, and I'm coming for you. Remember the Hitler Pop book? Hitler was already in an agreement with Italy because who was the enemy? USSR. What about Stalin? He knows Germany will go to war with the West. I will underfund Germany and I will make sure the war keep on going. Both the West, France, Britain, those alliances, and Germany will exhaust each other in battle, and eventually who will remain as the powerful kingdom? Mine kingdom. They are all lies at one table, but they are really willing to co-work together because they have a common goal. What was the common goal on the alliance? The Ribbentrop Pact was all about spheres of influence. Hitler needed to co-share the Baltic states after he captures them. Invading Poland, he needs to co-share these Baltic states. But Hitler was not willing to share them because eventually, how do I share with someone who I will eventually attack? And that's why the alliance is suspended. But they come back, redraw their terms, and the war continues. So we had a lot of lessons to learn from this. So this is after the resurrection of the King of the South, right from 2004. You come to 2014 and you see them into an alliance. And as they're in this alliance, it's because they have a bigger picture. In the mind of Putin, he's using Donald Trump. What is the main objective? The history of World War I. Germany sending Lenin to USSR to do what? To overthrow the monarchy. Because Germany knows if I ever overthrow the monarchy, the Russian monarchy under Caesar Nicholas II, I will not face war on two fronts. The same problem with Putin. He sees America and allies as the enemy. I will use Donald Trump, this character, to destroy America from the inside. And the Battle of Ipsus, we were able to see it was Trump versus the three arms of the government, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And with him, who is alongside Donald Trump in this conflict, it's Putin. Putin knows when America begins to collapse and crumble from the inside, it leaves him on a better state to be the powerful kingdom. So all those lines. But the most important point I want us to see, we are here and we want to understand the mode of warfare. According to the histories, in every history, what we saw is that in the Battle of Asculum, elephants determined the war. In the Battle of Beneventum, elephants determined the war. In the Battle of Argos, elephants determined the war. And so our big problem was, what is this elephant? And you need to go backwards to trace what is the elephant. We came to 2018, we needed to see what was the elephant. We needed to come to 2016 and see what was the elephant. And because there is nothing that begins halfway in our line, we eventually came to 1999 and saw that it is actually the elephant. And so we had 1, 2, 3 testimonies to tell us we're in an information age. So that's how we're able to explain that actually we are in the information age. We are not looking for hot wars. Number 2, we also needed to understand they're not fighting each other's kingdom, spheres of influence. How? You just need to go backwards. Come to 2018. Was America willing to capture Russia? What was the issue about? What was the issue in 2016? And then you realize by looking at past battles, we were able to cement our understanding that this is how the nature of the warfare looks like. So, this is the other connection that I made. my connection, that if this waymark is the waymark Sunday law, this waymark 2016 is the waymark increase of knowledge. I'm speaking these at the capacity of the line of the priests. And this waymark 2018, after their confrontation, after their alliances here, for the first time now, they turn against one another. They actually manifest their intentions that actually they are not willing to collaborate and co-work together forever. Because in 2018, after alliances, what do we have? A battle between the king of the north and the king of the south. And this is the waymark formalization. So if you use the fractal, if that terminology is correct, for me, if you use a fractal to teach you about the bigger line, you can just pick this concept and show this history here. This is 2014 here. This is the waymark increase of knowledge. This is the waymark formalization. This is the waymark COP. So this would be 2016. This would be 2018. And when you look at what is happening today, it seems the king of the north and the south looks to be in an alliance, lies on one table. They are not willing to fight one another, but you need to see their motives. At 2016, they seem to be closely connected, but it won't take long. In the waymark formalization, what do you see? This is my perspective. By the time we get to this waymark here, we need to see a battle. And I think this battle is what will bring to the total downfall of the king of the south at the close of probation. So you can take this model here and maybe help you to understand. That's my assumption. So then, another line of thinking that I wanted us to have. So we were now able to prove in all these waymarks here. Let me just, to tidy my work, when you come to all these waymarks, 2018, 2019, 2021, and the waymark Sunday law, there is one interesting discovery that you will find when you overlay all the characteristics. So the first thing we saw, elephants. So in all these wars, 2019, we were able to see it's about spheres of influence. Info war, proxy war. 2021, sphere of influence. Info war, proxy war. 2018, sphere of influence. Info war, proxy. The same sphere So this is the recurring theme when you look at all these dates. And what I really wanted us to see, and the purpose of my class, was when you come into this history, this is Asculum, this is Beneventum, and this is what? Argos. What you're going to see, if you fill the gap, what should you also see in the waymark Sunday law? You need to see spheres of influence. You need to see the concept of info war, and you also need to see proxy war. Now there is a problem. For those who would buy Elder Terry's line of thinking, when you look at what Elder Terry has tried to demonstrate, she has shown when you come to 2021, and this is the pattern that we have always had, and this is the waymark 2024. So we marked that 2021 is the deadly wound. And 2024 is the what? Death. So what brought the deadly wound of the king of the south in 2021? The result, the cause, is what brings this effect, death. And according to her, what has she tried to demonstrate? That this is dealing with the what? Whatever is happening internally in where? And Elder Terry will try to bring thoughts about Navalny. Is that the correct spelling? I don't know if that's the correct spelling. This is the opposition in Putin's regime. I'm not saying I disagree with this, but I want us to have a concept. When everything was being set up in 2018, one of the line of thinkings that we had is to look at the history of the world wars. Because when you go to world wars, we have World War I and we have World War II, which when you use triple application will teach us about World War what? So let's come to World War I. And when you come to World War I, we have what we call the Western Front and the Eastern Front. You come to World War II, we have the Western Front and we also have the Eastern Front. So when you come to the fronts, so when you look at the world wars, when you look at the Western Front, you need to know that these fronts represented different things. Because in World War I, the Western Front was actually a war. I'm just going to put it as the king of the north. Copy kifuniko. So you're going to see that the Western Front was a war actually between the king of the north versus who? Versus the West. And I'm going to put the West as Europe. So right from 2003, when World War I began, according to the models, this is Antigonus, not you, who has defeated Eumenes in 1989, the Battle of Gabin, and it makes him the master of all Asia. The Allies send ultimatum to Antigonus: you need to relinquish your power, or it will be war. Antigonus is not willing to do that. And that application is this history here. It is the same story of Austria-Hungary, who has a conflict with Serbia because of a sphere of influence called Bosnia. This is one of the Baltics, this is one of the Slav states that were part of Ottoman Empire. Sorry for too much history, but Ottoman Empire collapses in around 1910, 1914. The Ottoman we have been looking from Josiah Leeds' perspective. And all these kingdoms that formed the Ottoman Empire, as they split, big powers want to capture them as spheres of influence. One of them is Bosnia. Austria-Hungary aims to capture this kingdom. Serbia has more control and influence over Bosnia, but looks too weak and vulnerable into the threats of Austria-Hungary. That history is the same history of Antigonus, because when you overlay the history of the Third Diadochi War, this was the Third Diadochi War, which was overlaid to World War I. This was the history of the Fourth Diadochi War, which was overlaid to the history of World War II. They all have the same players. These ones, that and World War I end on a ceasefire. There are many parallels we'll draw to equate them all together. But you will actually see this is America, who has an attempt to attack Iraq. And the European powers, France, Britain, Russia by then, Russia is no longer the king of the south by this time. It's not resurrected. They are all going to send ultimatums. do not invade Iraq. But you know of Collins Powell, who goes to the Congress, blackmails them to believe that Iraq possesses weapons of mass destruction. I hope you can now see a familiar narrative to what we are experiencing today. And they are going to approve American military to attack Iraq, even after the West sending ultimatums. And it becomes a conflict right from 2003 onwards between Europe, who thinks this is a violation of the international law, and whatever happens in Iraq brings a crisis. Human rights are going to be violated. So it's the same thing. Austria-Hungary eventually invades Serbia, even after an ultimatum was sent, don't invade. And the claim was Austria-Hungary possesses weapons of mass Serbia possesses weapons of mass destruction, but eventually they will invade. You go to those histories and you can actually see it is a war between USA and Europe. This is the model that we were given. So as much as we would want to see this model here, unipolarism, we need to understand that this victory must be won. The king of the north has to silence and bring into subjection the European entities, which we spoke of, one of them being the UN, EU, and NATO. Because I think studies were made to demonstrate the goodness of all these organizations. They are there to prevent this model and to enhance multilateralism. Are we together? But it's a war between Trump and these organizations. I hope you can actually see it today when Trump is actually working by himself. The other line of thinking was on World War I, the Eastern Front. And this was a war between the king of the north and the king of the south. East is Germany versus Stalin. Operation Barbarossa, 1940. Is it 40 or 41? This also showed us so you will see that the Eastern Front in World War I gave us a testimony of Daniel 11:40, king of the north, king of the south. And then you come to World War II, and this was the Western Front, the Battle of Ipsus, when World War II began, and Germany together with Stalin are together to fight against the West, and we aligned the West to be these three arms of the government. So this was the king of the north versus, I'm going to say itself, I don't know whether that's the correct one, but I'm going to say it's Trump versus America. And while Trump is here, they are together with who? The king of the south. So this is USA versus itself. Trump trying to bring down the foundations, trying to bring down the establishments of the Sixth Kingdom, a war that began in 2016. So there is a good parallel if you would want to understand, to take this war in this election in 2016 and overlay it here in 2024. You're going to see a lot of truths, because this is just a repeat of this. And then we came to the Eastern Front here. And the Eastern Front is consistent. In World War II, the king of the north versus the king of the south. So the point I want us to see is that the Eastern Front gave us the perspective of a war between Russia and America. But the Western Front are different. One is about America and Europe. The other one is about America and itself. So with this line of thinking, what I wanted us to see is that when you speak about the king of the north, there are two things we are going to trace. We are going to trace the internal history, and we're also going to trace the what? The internal history is this, what we would call, let me just drop this line, the Western Front of World War II. And external is what you would call the Eastern Front. That is World War I and World War II. So when you trace the king of the north, we are going to see Eastern and Western. And it is interesting to note, I remember 2019, December, when Elder Tess came here in Kenya for the camp meeting, one of the thoughts she was able to share with us is to prove to us how Donald Trump rose as a dictator in 2019, for those who can remember. And she was able to draw histories right from World War I and World War II, going to past dictators and showing how a dictator rises in power. The first step is that a dictator has to capture what? His own nation. Are we together? Before the dictator goes to the world. And when you come to the nation, how many steps are involved? Two for the nation. First, you need a political party, a driving vehicle to propel you to power, and then you need to silence all the dissenting voice. You need to purge any element of opposition. After that, no one can raise a voice against you. You're actually a dictator. Then greed continues where they want to control the world. We will do this for Putin. Right from 1989, he comes to power, a very weak and vulnerable Russia. The Russian mafias control the kingdom. He has to start counting these mafias and bringing them into subjection, taking over the political party, bringing a one-party state. By 2014, he's conquering external nations in the world, showing he's a dictator. The same thing was done with Hitler and Stalin. One, the operation, what do we call it? The Night of Knives. And the other one was the Night of what? Broken knives and what? Broken glass. Yes, Night of broken glass, Night of knives, where anyone who dissents is silenced. And what we saw, when you overlay these histories, Elder Tess was able to show November 9, 1989, there was this pattern, and November 9, 2019. And what Elder Tess tried to demonstrate is that in November 9, actually the same war brought by the Battle of Gabin, that the king of the south is defeated. There is the concept of the defeat from what? From inside. Eumenes. He's defeated from the inside. His most allied force, the Silver Shields, betray him. And they hand him, and he is killed by Antigonus. We also saw of November 9, and Elder Tess was trying to demonstrate the same thing. You need to see a collapse of America from the inside. The king of the south is there. We know the alliance. He's pulling the strings, but the collapse comes from where? From the inside. The same thing in November 9. America was there, propagating and bringing the supply and support that is needed for these proxies, like the Mujahideen, funding protests by the Polish movement. The king of the south collapsed from the inside, but from a distance you'd see the influence of the king of the north. The same. Trump brought down the collapse of the nation from the inside November 9, but you'd see the activities of the king of the south. This is one of the models that was brought. So as much as we have this concept of the collapse from the inside, I would agree with it because I have many models that would prove that. But I want us to see is that we actually need to compare and contrast the king of the north and the king of the what? And the king of the south. And what we are only saying is that the king of the south, we are only going to see the collapse internally. And let me put it here. And this eternally is this. But I'm suggesting a good compare and contrast would show you that you also need to trace the external collapse of the king of the south. And when you come to the externally, it is this concept of the Western Front. It is this war between the king of the north and the king of the south. So as much as you would see the collapse of the king of the south internally here, I'm suggesting being consistent with the models given by the world wars, by the Diadochi wars. You also need to see a concept in 2024 about spheres of influence, information war, and proxy wars. You need to see a collapse externally. The conflict that began in 2021 will lead to the death of the king of the south. What we marked as 2021 is the Ukrainian war, if you can remember. So you can't narrow from Ukraine an external and just say the death, this is the beginning, the deadly wound, and then you say the death is internal. Navalny and the wife had nothing to do directly with the Ukrainian war. They will rebuke and condemn it. But you need to see that this is the perspective of the Western Eastern Front, the war between the king of the north and the south. And so we would mark Ukraine here, spheres of influence. But we need to come to 2024 and realize the same year brought the exposure and the collapse of the king of the south externally. The other line of thinking I would agree. So when you come to 2021, you come to 2024, and maybe you come to the way Mark would mark COP. So Elder Terry has tried to demonstrate that the fall of the king of the south is progressive. Speaks of the deadly wound, speaks of the death, and then speaks of the what? Decapitation. So the decapitation is at the close of probation. So as Elder Terry will mark the decapitation, and some of the sentiments she has tried to air out is that the moment Russia ends the war with Ukraine, what does that mark? It marks the total downfall of the king of the south. So it tells you, if the decapitation here, you are marking an external event, you also need to see this was external. And if you need to thread a story well, you also need to see something to do with what? External. And this is where we bring the issues of the Middle East, the collapse of Assad's regime, which was one of the most stronghold of the king of the south, and it all takes place in this year 2024. So you need to have a line of thinking that explains what's happening in the Middle East, and it does not just end here. It continues and it's leading us here. And you can actually see what is happening in the world. We have a sphere of influence formerly controlled by the king of the south, Iran. And what is happening to Iran? They have no power that would protect them. America is bullying them. And what is happening to Russia? They are silent. Would Russia have done that in 2019? Would Russia have done that before 2021 backwards? So you need to be able to see these thoughts. The same way in World War I, Serbia has been attacked by Austria-Hungary, and Russia is too weak to help. Why is Russia too weak to help? They have just been in a war that has cost them dearly. Can you see that? Russia has just been in a war that is going to cost them too dearly, that allies are being attacked and they can't actually help. So we need to continue with the same line of thinking. I don't know how many minutes I have. 10 minutes. 8. Yes.
What is the theory's understanding of this canon in 2024? Does she comment that it's not there or she's silent about that issue? I know Aaron said it's like there's no internal death according to him. Russia is winning one night, so cannot use it. So what about
Okay. I've not had any, someone can correct me. Sometimes we forget, or someone says something and you can't actually capture everything in a. I don't think she has commented anything externally 2024. She has more emphasized on the internal. So for me, I will disagree a little bit with Aaron's scene. I'm saying the structure is there to show both internal and external. But I would agree halfway with Aaron saying that I would see also something externally. So for me, I'm saying Aaron Sin's, maybe the way he puts it is not the way I would put it, but I'm saying for me, when I look at the models, I say they are both internal and external. For King of the North, King of the South. And what is happening in the inside of Russia, it's not just a basic thing. To me, it ends up touching on our message of equality because it's a fight for democracy. So to me, that is very significant, what is happening inside Russia and what has been happening. So, but the point is, that is not enough to tell me it's the collapse of the king of the south, because I also need to see what is happening internally. I need to understand the geopolitics of what is happening in the Middle East. Why is Russia so silent about countries that were formerly allies being threatened and attacked, being bullied? They can only give a consolement. That is wrong. We will disagree with that. Before 2014, when America dared invade Syria, what did Russia do? They sent armies too. And Russia was actually looking to be more threatening. They would even fly their jets close to American jets, trying to intimidate the nemesis. Today they are not doing that. It tells you there is something that has changed. I really wish I had time to expound on those thoughts, but I really hope you are following my line of thinking. So because of time, maybe we can deal with Q&A later. I just want to air one more important point. So when you come to 2018, we spoke of spheres of influence, the Battle of Heraclea. And this is a war of mind on mind. This is the narrative that Elder Tess will try to bring. If you want to understand how the information war looks like, she takes us to the history of the first information war that was fought in heaven. It is Michael versus who? The dragon. And in the first war, Michael is going to lose spheres of influence, a third of the angels. To whose control? The dragon. And so Satan, Lucifer, is able to influence the mind of these angels to buy his ideologies, to buy the mentality that this is a dictator God, this is a God who wants to rule with an iron fist, whatever kind of accusation Satan gives. And she's able to go to the end of the last war, the last chapter of the great controversy. And we see a repeat of the war because Christ wants to make a statement to Satan. Now, Satan has followers. It's already decided. You can't change your character. It's even after the second advent. It's the third advent. The New Jerusalem is coming. And you will actually see that Satan is going to make all the evil beings subject to his authority, acknowledge the supremacy of Christ, and Satan can do nothing about it. So it's about spheres of influence, and the concept or the principle that was derived was to show us that it is a war of mind. I want to influence someone's mind to make this person buy my ideologies. That's one line of thinking. There is also a war of cyber attacks. Information always a broad subject, just to say it. And when you come to 2018, the spheres in contest, one of them was Syria. The other one was Afghanistan. What was the other one? So let me just go with the two. I forget all of them. But what you will see, what was the issue about? 2018 is Trump threatening to withdraw troops from where? From these countries. What is his claim? The country is overspending too much. He's a capitalist. The same narrative he has been crying. We are not going to use our taxpayers' money to involve in foreign affairs, to involve in foreign battles that do not benefit us. They end up hurting us more. He's lamenting of the deaths of the American soldiers in these lands and no gains. He's going to accuse the democratic regime under Barack Obama for even invading these countries. There was also Libya, if I'm not wrong, after they killed Caliph Haftar. So, no, after they killed Muammar Gaddafi. So, and Trump is threatening to withdraw troops. And he will partially withdraw troops in 2018. And by doing that, you are giving an advantage to your enemy because Russia will come and fill the vacuum of where the troops live. Are we together? Giving Putin a more grip and strength on these spheres of influence. There was another line of thinking in this conflict. The issue was about, there was also Ukraine. Because there is a Kerch Strait crisis here, where there is that Kerch Strait, a passage like the Strait of Hormuz, the one in Iran, where it controls the world trade. Most of the ships pass from the Middle East, from Eastern Europe, Ukraine and other countries, using the Kerch Strait. But now Russia controls the strait, and they capture some Ukraine sailors and put them into detention. There is voice from the European nations to release them. And Trump suspends talks with Putin because of this issue in Ukraine. There is also an issue about sanctions. And in sanctions, there is one very famous oligarch, a Russian mafia called Oleg Deripaska. He has the world's largest aluminum company by then in the world. And for those who have seen more documentaries about these oligarchs, you know how they serve a good purpose for Putin by passing sanctions. So I have a company. West has sanctioned me from trading, but I have a character here who can trade for me. So Putin will will be able to allow them to exploit Russian resources, and they will be able to trade these resources to the West by passing sanctions. They also finance him to wage his wars. So it's all about sanctions. And Trump is willing to lift sanctions to one of these oligarchs called Oleg Deripaska. December 19, 2018, Trump exactly does that. He lifts sanctions on this character and withdraws troops partially in 2018. So, and this gives a stronghold for Putin. You come to 2019 and we have the same line of thinking. We mark Africa. We mark Syria, spheres of influence. We mark Libya. We mark Venezuela, China, Turkey, all those. But there is the same consistent line of thinking I want us to have. What was the issue in Syria, Africa, Libya, Venezuela? Specifically for this, Trump fully withdraws troops in Syria here. The European-led government is going to lose strongholds in Libya and Venezuela. You know the conflict between Juan Guaido and who? Nicolas Maduro. What was the main intent of America in these countries? You need to go back to when the war began. A book ending is made by Elder Tess when she was here, that everything in 2019 began where? 2014. Every crisis here is going to be bookended from 2014 to 2019. In Syria, America wants to construct a gas pipe. Assad and his regime refuses because Russia, despite them sanctioning Russia, they're able to lift some sanctions because too much sanctioning affects them more than Russia. Russia has one of the largest produce of oil and gas, and their gas is cheap because during the Soviet era, they are able to construct pipes. Like, is it called the Notre Dame or Nostradam? Something like that. One going directly to Germany. So Putin only switches on the tap, gas flows. And when it gets to the European markets, it's cheap. For America and allies in the Middle East, they use tankers. Sometimes they collapse, they get damaged, it's expensive. So when you compare in the market, American gas and Russia's gas, what do Europe prefer? Russia. So what do? We need to counter this threat. They want to construct a pipe like Russia. The only problem is the landscape. Geographically, from Middle East, the only strategic location you need to pass a pipe on land is Syria. Or you construct a pipe through the Mediterranean, which is even more costly and expensive and dangerous in case of a leakage. So they need to come to Assad and convince him, allow us to do that. But what is happening? Assad is influenced by who? By Russia. Do you think Assad would allow that to happen? They deny. Iraq has the same plan, a sphere influenced by Russia, and they want to do the same, and Assad accepts. What do you think happens to America? They feel provoked. What is in their mind? Arab uprising, a regime change. The question is, why would they want to change a regime? Because they want to have a regime whose mind they can do what? They can influence. Because Assad is influenced by Putin, they want to replace it with another regime. The same thing with Libya, the largest producer of oil and gas in South America. Maduro is influenced by Putin. They want to replace Nicolas Maduro with the people's president